Good evening, class. We represent the Dynamic group of the executive MBA class. And we are here today to consider a very dicey topic, very controversial. And our topic is humanitarian intervention. And with me, I am Emmanuel Maxvoy, the chairperson for this discussion. And we have once again, welcome. Yeah, our test is rather unfortunately a very long one, and it will be very boring to read over. So I'll quickly take some text within just to give the overview of what we are into this text. Like I said, humanitarian intervention. It is predominantly referred to and perceived as armed intervention. It is about duties of aid and rescue. Magdalena also observed that since the end of the Cold War, geopolitical trends have given greater prominence than ever before to the enactment of humanitarian intervention in order to avert or allay humanitarian crisis. Interventionism is no longer sustainable as a result of the increasing threat to global peace. It is a legitimacy. This is as a result of many atrocities and in order to prevent these atrocities. And Alex Bellamy and Nicholas Wheeler have questioned that should military intervention be permissible when government massively violates the human rights of their citizens? Powerful states could use it as a justification to invade the least powerful just to serve their own interest. However, we are each other's keeper. Meanwhile, others also believe, each for himself. Biku Perek, who defines it as an action wholly or primarily guided by sentiment of humanity, compassion, or fellow feeling. Sin Murphy also defines humanitarian intervention as the threat or use of force by states, a group of states or international organization, primarily for the purpose of protecting the nationals of the target state from widespread violation of internationally recognized human rights. The responsibility to protect argument had been an unwelcome good to some within the international society. Some object from the perspective of the weaker state, arguing that giving legitimacy to intervention makes the weaker state subjective to the most powerful ones. Others have also questioned the morality of states risking the lives of their armed men and women just to save strangers. There are other differing views in literature to the debate on humanitarian intervention. However, this essay will restrict itself to two of the moral perspectives of humanitarian intervention, with emphasis on pluralist, that's realist, and then the solidarist, that is the naturalist school of thoughts. Now, the solidarist position. They believe we are each other's keeper. According to Bellamy and Wheeler, the global consensus after abominable Holocaust Act was for the Society of States to establish laws prohibiting genocide, forbidding the mistreatment of civilians, and recognizing basic human rights. However, this principle collide with that of sovereignty, as defined above, the principle which enjoins states to act as guardians of their citizens, security being the parties. Kofi Annan, according to them, declared that there was developing international norm to forcibly protect civilians who are at risk from genocide and mass killing. Should a state exhibiting criminality towards or against its own people or section therefore be considered functioning as observed by Bellamy and Wheeler? When part of the functions of the state is offering protection, not killing, abuse, or criminality of any sort. Fernando Tassi, for example, argues that sovereignty derives from a state's responsibility to protect its citizens, and when a state fails in its duty, it loses its responsibility to protect its citizens. Sovereignty right, hence, we have the moral responsibility to protect civilians of such states from genocide and mass killing, irrespective of what the law says. There are others who point to the idea of common humanity, arguing that all individuals have basic human rights and duty to uphold the rights of others. Tony Blair and George Bush, as the most prominent, argue that today's globalized world is so integrated that massive human rights violations in one part of the world have an effect on every other part, creating moral obligation for intervention. Annan contrasts the interventionist view with that of the states in the global south, who express worry that humanitarian intervention is a Trojan horse, rhetoric designed to legitimate the interference of the strong in the affairs of the weak. However, this line of objective to humanitarian intervention is equally suspicious because it already anticipates abhorrent behavior. The fear of weaker states could be understood from the view that stronger states in this instance, where lie strong interests, be it economic, political, etc., as it were in Africa in the early years of independence, could instigate acts of subversion and instability using rogue and disenchanted citizens such as in such a situation. Aside these views, objections to humanitarian intervention are varied. Many have questioned its legal foundation, and others maintain that it could be a precursor to selective justice. Now, the humanitarian intervention, that's the objectionist position, they believe that in the normal circumstance, responsibility to protect also applies in equal measure to all states, including interveners taking care of citizens not to expose them to risks owing to serve strangers. In the first instance, realists claim that states always harbor self-motivated reasons other than humanitarian, owing to intervene. The issue of selectivity and the Trojan horse suspicion, as identified above, needs much consideration by the House. However, the problem lies in its abuse, the selectivity, and the potency to invade the least powerful in the name of intervention, only to satisfy the whims and the caprices of the most powerful. Wheeler asks the question, do states always apply principles of humanitarian intervention selectively as the realists claim? On this question, Wheeler says, they do, pointing to Frank and Rollins' claims that the international community and states with undeniable power blatantly fail to effect rescue to save Jews. The US and Britain have continuously made the case that Pakistan is a key player in the war on terror in Afghanistan, which is linked to the very survival of the Western society because Pakistan is a nuclear state, hence the creation of the AFPAC. Strategy to fight the insurgency in that region, as observed by the President Asif Ali Zardari. The catastrophe in Pakistan could be exploited by the insurgents if the necessary action are not taken to avert the humanitarian crisis, something the community of society might be leading to war on terror. It again raised the question of whether such acts of God should be exempted from the remit of the responsibility to protect. This is because in all the natural disasters that have struck nations recently, it is clearly observable that whereas nations such as the US with Hurricane Katrina and China with series of earthquakes have been able to deal with them almost independently. Other objectionists, this time from the legal perspective, insist that the common good is best preserved by maintaining the status quo, observing the sovereignty of states, non-intervention and no use of force as enshrined in the United States Charter. They refer to the international law under Article 2, subsection 4 of the United Nations Charter, which prohibits states from forcible intervention in another state, declaring as follows: all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations. In this case, my fellow brothers and sisters, why then is Bashar, the Sudanese leader, being pursued for Darfur and not Tony Blair for Iraq? Is a question that needs consideration. Is the suspicion of selective human intervention evident in these two instances as the realists seriously consider this question as well? The next line of objection to humanitarian intervention comes from the statists, who claim that political leaders do not have the moral right to shed the blood of their own citizens on behalf of suffering foreigners. And in this direction, B. Cooper encapsulates it clearly, saying, citizens are the exclusive responsibility of their state, and their state is entirely their own business. Thus, if a civil authority have broken down or is behaving in an appalling way towards its citizens, this is the responsibility of that state's citizens and, crucially, its political leaders. However, ladies and gentlemen, should we understand humanitarian intervention from the perspectives of natural disasters as painted in the case of Pakistan and Haiti, as expressed above? Again, the same question applies. How could such citizens bring back such state? Imagine Peke's view as New World Order, each one for himself, kind of way. What would have happened to Haiti by now, when even the seat of government was brought down literally by the earthquake? How could such a government bring back to the nation, let alone its citizens? This evening, we want to look at this text by deliberating on the emerging issues. I must admit that because of the lengthy nature of the text, we could not exhaust the details. However, the brief has given us ideas as to what we are in to discuss. So, we will first look at humanitarian intervention. What is it all about?
Yeah, to start with, I will try to put a definition on the humanitarian intervention. Now, referring to the text, number 76, it says, Piku Parek, who defines it as an action wholly or primarily guided by sentiments of humanity, compassion, or fellow feeling. Now, 78 says, St. Murphy also defines humanitarian intervention as the threat or use of force by a state, a group of states, or international organization. Now, if you look at these two definitions, the common line is on humanitarian grounds. The intervention is always based on humanitarian grounds. But I'm saying that this is the way they see humanitarian, or they define humanitarian intervention. I'm saying this definition lacks the other motives for humanitarian intervention. It is not only based on the humanitarian grounds, because humanitarian interventions are very expensive. And so intervening states look at the cost involved. And so they look at the interest that will accrue to them after the intervention. So if you take example of Somalia in the early 90s, 1993, when they were in crisis, U.S. intervened, but not until their citizens were pressuring them to do. Even when they went, they did not commit much resources. So they even didn't win. They had to lose most of their soldiers. And they also failed to capture the warlord at the time. But when it comes to Kosovo, U.S. didn't wait for the citizens to pressurize them to intervene. But because of the hidden agenda, hidden interest, they willingly intervened, and they were able to sort the problem there out. So that is my view on the definition, and then some of the factors that they consider, the intervening states consider before they go in.
That's a very brilliant contribution. Sorry, we've just been joined by a gentleman, and he introduced himself.
Yeah, my name is Jojo Kwesen, and I'm sorry for coming late. There was so much traffic, and so I apologize for coming late. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We've just had a brief of the test and trying to look at what humanitarian intervention is all about. So we're just trying to make some meaning out of the text.
Following line 80, to define humanitarian intervention in simpler terms, is basically to help a state in disaster, whether the disaster is man-made or not. Now, as to the question whether the aid is wanted or unwanted, as to whether the aid that's coming in is forced or not forced or voluntary, is as we go along will be discussed. But in simpler terms, humanitarian intervention is aiding a country in a disaster, be it man-made or not.
Okay, that is a nice view shared. Any other view as to what humanitarian intervention is all about?
Humanitarian intervention from our text here tries to look at the assistance that people in a difficult or a crisis situation are assisted, in a form of material or financial aids, But you realize that, again, in another text, it comes in the form of armed interventions, So, globally, you realize that intervention comes either in the form of aid, material, or armed interventions, so to speak.
Now, having looked at the definitions and then deliberating on this issue, can we look at these interventions in terms of maybe disaster, economic, some other social disaster? How do we make, or what do you make of it?
Okay, for humanitarian intervention, well, being the only female in the group, I would use what we locally call abadai. No, abadai. I don't know. It's
feeling for human.
Yes, abadai. Locally is you feel for one another. What we do is social-wise, from one mother to the other mother. Let's get back to our own culture, basically. For example, Accra living and Kumasi living. This is the case. Accra living has turned so individualistic that you see a child turning wrong, you just look the other way and just pass by. Even if you say it, the child has a whole lot of words to say to you. But go to Kumasi and see. If I wear a short skirt in Kumasi, I will be stopped by every mother every 5 minutes to comment. So basically, at the end of the day, I will not wear it. So what I'm trying to say is humanitarian intervention not only cut across states, it cut across individuals in our social aspects as well.
Okay, that's a social aspect. As a nation, can we look at some other aspects where intervention on humanitarian ground?
I must also say that if you look at this global scale, Ebola.
Sorry about that.
Ebola, although it's now around West Africa, UN and WHO, they intervene because now it is in US. And so that spirit of we care for each other, basis of humanitarian ground, humanitarian intervention is at work. Because who knows, US will quickly have 2 cases of the Ebola. And so if your neighbor's house is on fire, you may think it may not get to you. But within a short time, it will be there. That is why it is good to be each other's keeper.
So these then lead us to the 2 schools of thought. One believes that it is good, and the other believes it is not necessary. So we like to look at it from that direction. Is humanitarian intervention necessary? Because we read from the article we just read that it more or less breaks down the sovereignty of a nation, trying to intervene in some other countries' affairs. So what do we think of this?
Yeah, I think let me come in here. First of all, I think it's a very beautiful discussion because humanity is the most important element in every aspect of life. And so we cannot talk about humanity without talking about the creator of humanity. Now, let me take it back a little to how humanity started. First of all, we do not exist, or we did not come to existence by just coming to existence, but we all believe that there's a supreme being who actually created man. Okay, that is God. Now, first of all, God recognizes that it is important that He creates the world, and when He created, He also recognized that there should be somebody who must, oversee the creation. And therefore He created man. And then when He created man, He charged man the responsibility of ensuring that the earth is taken care of, humanity is taken care of, and everything that existed is being catered for. But somewhere along the line, man abused that mandate, that responsibility that was conferred on man. And so that trust was broken. And for that matter, sin came to the world. And this created, wickedness in the part of man, fiendishness in the part of man. And so man started, losing control of what he's supposed to take care of. And so at a point in time, God also came back again and said, look, well, I created you, and I realized you have lost control, but I still want to bring you back on track. But this time, I'm giving you charge over other humans. Make sure that love controls everything. Love controls everything that you take control of. And so love became the paramount ingredient in humanity. And that's why Jesus Christ said that I want love to be the foremost commandment of this life. And so the point is this, that humanity is very, very key. And then we are created to take charge of our earth, environments, people that live on this earth and everything. So it is imperative that we take that full responsibility. And like I said, because of that loss of trust, humanity was undermined. And therefore, it's important that God restore man again. And so, to me, that is where I will start from. As we go on, I will develop from, continue from that point.
Okay, that's a very nice religious sermon from Reverend Jojo. He has just looked at it from a religious point of view. But we really want to look at it from tropical issues prevailing currently within our global world, having understood that it is God-ordained principle that we should be each other's keeper. And I would like to read one of the texts. Can we open to 121? That is page 4. Page 4, 121. The solidarist position. And it goes this way. We are each other's keeper. This is the normative argument advanced by solidarists, just as our brother tried bringing it from religious point of view. Now, according to Bellamy and Wheeler, the global consensus after the abominable Holocaust Act was for the Society of States to establish laws prohibiting genocide, forbidding the mistreatment of civilians, and recognizing basic human rights. However, these principles collide with that of sovereignty as defined above, the principle which enjoins states to act as guardians of their citizens' security within their borders. So I would like us to look at it from this context.
Yeah. You realize that from what you have read out, the text tries to recognize humanity as a group that should be concerned about each other. You see, vis-a-vis the existence of the state. So that at one point, whilst we try to respect us or care for each other, we also are cautious in such a way that the issue of the state is also respected, so that one other group, be it powerful, could not just take on the other for the mere reason that he has the power, So I am of the thinking that at any point in time, see, where do we spell out the actual meaning of humanitarian intervention vis-a-vis caring for each other, and then recognizing our definition of the state?
Well, it is the derogatory rights of every nation to defend and protect its citizens. And like we've been made aware that where that is not in order, the intervention comes in. So, now the question we want to ask is, if so, then what are the role of our states in this case? And is this intervention not conflicting the UN law? That's 2 subsection 4, where the sovereignty of states are being infringed upon.
Let me answer to you at least some aspect of the issues you raised. First, the state or the governance of a state to protect its citizen is not a prerogative. It is an obligation. It is an obligation. They sign up for it, they swear an oath to it. It is an obligation. So they are entitled to pursue and achieve human rights and basically administrative justice. Plain as that. Non-debatable. Now, the second thing as to whether any other state can intervene during a disaster. My issue is not all disasters are man-made. Some are by nature. Example, flooding in Haiti, earthquake here, I think there was an explosion in Japan, if I'm right. You get me? These are disasters that are not man-made. And without the help of other states, cannot be kept, or they cannot even move on to the next step, especially Haiti. They got help from every aspect of the society. Even the entertainers and the musicians actually helped. Not just the UN and the World Bank. You understand my point? Okay. So now this is a natural disaster. Now, man-made disaster, the state can come in and say, oh, I want to protect my sovereignty because I caused it A, B, C, and D, or this particular thing caused A, B, C, and D, and I can put C, D, E, and F in place to curb that A, B, C, D problem. You understand? Meaning this particular state in its sovereignty has its own power and resources and the capacity to actually solve their disasters. That, in that sense, the other states who are capable of helping can decide to, lay back and go, country Z can take care of itself. Do you understand my point? Now, as to the law of the UN, whether you infringing on the sovereignty, that will depend on if the intervention is a forceful one. But like I said, country Z has declared I can take care of my problems. That was it. I don't need any other intervention. What the other states can do is to sit back and follow. And when called upon, they can interfere. You understand my point?
Yeah, I understand. So in that direction, can't you also look at it from this point that most of these problems in areas that the intervention are needed are really planned for somebody to take control? Like if you read from the text 161, that's page 5. By extension of this line of thought, some, like the architect of the Iraq and the Afghan wars, Tony Blair and George Bush, as the most prominent, argue that today's globalized world is so integrated that massive human rights violations in one part of the world have an effect on every other part, creating moral obligations. And it's rather unfortunate. This same George Bush has been a very architect to this Iraq issue for the accusation of that they are developing nuclear weapons. But at the end, we have not had any evidence establishing that a nuclear industry or site have been found in Iraq. So what do you make out of this?
Well, I want to say that, first of all, I've been going through the definitions of humanitarian interventions, and I kind of have a problem. Now, if you look at the page 2, the text number 22, it says that in this essay, the debate on humanitarian intervention is presented. It defines what humanitarian intervention is as a theory in the literature. The various concepts. No, I think I missed the line. But what I saw was that they are saying intervention is where one nation uses war to actually intervene in another state. And I'm saying that, first of all, the underlying, point that war is used to intervene is totally wrong. Because to me, it is love that you can use to actually intervene in somebody's situation. Because if somebody is in need, or